All right, U.S. history students, periods 1, 4, and 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick lecture review, if you will. I feel more comfortable in my Jeep. Actually, I feel comfortable in front of my classroom, but, Corona. So anyways, I'm just going to drive around the neighborhood, and I'm just going to give you a quick review of World War II. We talked about the beginning of World War II. We talked about 3 different leaders. We talked about the Nuremberg trials, the final solution. Well, not really we talked about it. It was in the lecture, which you should have all been studying. And the test shouldn't have been that hard. 6 questions, pretty simple. From here on out, all my tests are going to be just like that. So I will post some notes for you to follow the Prezi, and you can answer it. You could use your Prezi, you could use your notes. As long as you understand the topics, that's all that matters to me. So before I get started, hopefully you guys are all healthy. You're good. Make good use of your time. Enjoy your family. I know that these times are different and they're difficult, but all you can be is positive. So anyways, what I'm going to talk about today real quick is I'm going to talk about World War II itself, and I'm going to give you I'm just going to storytell, if you will. You have access to the presentation if you want to. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask you to watch, I believe, 4 videos, and that's it. And it'll be short and sweet. I don't think I'm going to test you, but I'm going to ask you your opinions, your thoughts on a couple issues. But that's pretty much it. I just want to storytell. I just want to talk to you as if I'm lecturing to you, and so that it makes it easier for you to comprehend. So let's start with Pearl Harbor. You know about Pearl Harbor. We get sucker punched by the Japanese for the longest time. We wanted no part of the war. FDR wanted nothing. We were very neutral. It wasn't our problem. It was a fight across the pond. We didn't know who to side with. Did we side with the Germans? Did we side with the British? So we stayed out of it until Pearl Harbor, until we got sucker punched by the Japanese. You know why we got sucker punched. We talked about this in the last lecture. There was oil and rubber trade issues. The Japanese felt that we were doing them dirty by not trading with them. The leader of the Japanese, Emperor Hirohito, just like Mussolini, just like Stalin, just like Hitler, power hungry. He wanted his piece of the pie, so that's why they attacked us. And they figured if they sucker punch, if they get us and they hit us hard, then we'd be vulnerable. And they weren't necessarily wrong. They just didn't hit our entire fleet, so we were able to bounce back. So President Roosevelt goes to Congress, declares war. We go to war, and we're in this thing. You had 5 million Americans that volunteered. You had 10 million that were drafted. I got some notes. And right from the jump, the decision was made to fight in Europe. Want to fight in Europe and take care of that problem first, because Hitler was pretty powerful. Hitler was causing waves. He was winning. And so the decision was, let's beat Hitler first, fight in Europe with the Russians, with the British, and then we'd go take care of the Japanese. You had factories that were now changing. They were converting from building from pencils to bullets, from cars to bombs. So our economy started to do very well. We started to convert. Even women got involved. The term WAC, that's WAC, WAC, stood for Women Auxiliary Corps. So there was a general who actually decided, hey, we need women to help out. So the WAC was created. Pretty wacky, stupid, but Women Auxiliary Corps. So now you had women that were secretaries. They weren't volunteers anymore like in World War I. They were getting paid. They were drivers, kind of like what I'm doing right now. They were nurses. They did all kinds of stuff, everything except for fighting in the forefront. So you have that. You have African Americans that are fighting. You have 2.5 million African Americans. You have 300,000 Mexican Americans. Chinese Americans, not so many, 13,000. Japanese Americans, 33,000. Native Americans, 25,000. And you should also know that the Japanese were put in internment camps. They were seen as dangerous. They were seen as the enemy. And for the most part, the Japanese Americans agreed to it. That was their way to prove their loyalty. Fine, we want to prove to you that we're not your enemy. We'll do what you're told. We'll do what we're told until the war is over. So the Japanese Americans, they were called the Naisei. And pretty much what they did were they were translators. They knew the lay of the land. And they were fighting because they wanted to prove the loyalty. Native Americans were code talkers. All the communication that was done. I almost got hit by a cyclist. He almost hit me. Jeez. The Native Americans were code talkers. We would communicate in Native American language because the Japanese, they knew English. They studied and they learned here in the States. So every time there was code or any kind of communication, the Japanese knew exactly what we were doing. But when we used Native Americans and they would speak in Navajo, the Japanese weren't prepared for that. So the Native Americans was a big part of us winning the war. African Americans, they actually questioned themselves. They said, why are we going to fight for democracy in foreign lands when we're not even getting democracy here in the States? So a very valid question. The Chinese fought because they were victims to the Japanese. The Japanese had taken over China. We'll talk about that in a quick second. So you had a guy by the name of Randolph. And he was one of the first African-American civil rights leaders. And what Randolph ended up doing, he had 100,000 African-American men that were going to march at Washington, D.C. because they weren't being treated fair. African Americans weren't being treated fair. In the workplace, they weren't being treated fair. In the military. And so FDR actually caved. So Randolph actually went and met with him. And he said, you either fix things or we're going to march. And that wasn't going to look very good. You know, African Americans marching men in Washington, D.C. while we're at war. So Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, actually instituted the fair practice policy as far as work. So companies had to be fair when hiring African Americans. The military had to be fair when allowing them to fight. Actually, you had the Tuskegee Airmen, fighter pilots. So where am I at here so far? All right, so we win in Europe. You have something called D-Day, where we storm for 7 days the beaches of Normandy in France. There's an excellent video. It's slide 55 on my website on the Prezi, and I'll actually have the Prezi attached to this. So just watch 55. It's the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. It's pretty intense. So 7 days, we charge Europe. We kind of squeeze. We win. We kind of squeeze Hitler. Hitler eventually takes his own life, and Germany loses the war. By the way, there's another film, a video that I want you to watch. It's slide 35. It's actually a Walt Disney cartoon. So even Walt Disney got involved in this whole war. And it was a cartoon that he made, and it was a propaganda against the Nazis. This is how we explained to the American people why it is we're in this war. There are a lot of people wondering why we even fight. So slide 35, watch that video. Slide 55, watch that one on D-Day. We defeat the Russians. We defeat the Germans with the help of the Russians. It's called VE Day. May 8th, 1945, victory in Europe. So now that we've won in Europe, we turned our sights on the Japanese. There's all kinds of fighting in the Atlantic with the Japanese. The Japanese have taken over the Philippines. They've taken over China. They're expanding. They actually were on the way to Australia. And there's a bunch of battles. I'm not going to ask you to learn the battles. I'm not going to ask you to study them. Just know that we battled the living crap out of them, and it was pretty contentious. And we're gaining ground. It was called island hopping. I'm going to wave at these people. Hello. Again, I'm driving. So anyways, we're gaining ground on them. And okay, so I'm going to backtrack. During when we were fighting the Europeans, when we were fighting in Europe, President Roosevelt started a project called the Manhattan Project. Make sure you watch this one. This is slide 104 in my Prezi. The Manhattan Project was top secret. Not many people knew about this. And Albert Einstein was a big part of this. And during the Manhattan Project, what was created was the atomic bomb. And FDR eventually dies during his 4th term. And Truman, his vice president, becomes our new president. So President Truman takes over. It was so top secret that the vice president had no idea about the Manhattan Project. It was that secretive. So anyways, once Truman finds out, first of all, he's not happy that he was, not told about this. And then he's explained what it was, the A-bomb, the atomic bomb, and he's also explained how powerful it is and how expensive it was. So if you watch that slide, it's pretty interesting. So we're going to end with Truman basically decides to give the Japanese an ultimatum. Unconditional surrender or else. And that's all he said. Unconditional surrender. And the Japanese were not going to surrender. They're very tough. They're big on loyalty. They're big on pride and honor. I mean, they had the kamikaze. I'm sure you heard of what kamikazes were. These were dive bombers. They would get in the planes. They would shoot in the air. They'd have no landing gear. Once they got put in the plane, they were locked in. And their job was to go ahead and dive bomb. So the Japanese were loyal. They're all about honor. And they were not going to surrender. But they didn't know about this A-bomb. So President Truman orders the A-bomb to be dropped on 2 cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Off the top of my head, I don't know which one hit first. 3 days apart. Roughly 46 seconds is all it took to destroy these cities. I believe there's a video on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I'm not going to ask you to watch it, but if you're interested, it's there. I know it's there. So it wasn't until these 2 cities that were completely flattened and devastated that the emperor finally conceded. He said, I'm not going to let my people die over this. And that is when we won the war with Japan. So what do I have here? That's pretty much it. So this 12-minute video. I've given you a 12-minute lecture while I've driven around my neighborhood on one cut, by the way. I didn't want to do multiple cuts and multiple attempts. So there it is, World War II in a nutshell. I'll have a couple questions to follow up. One, should we have dropped an A-bomb? Was it necessary? If you watched the video that's attached to it, the devastation was tremendous. The death toll was huge. 2, did we do the right thing? It did end the war. And then the repercussions of this. Obviously, the Russians were not happy about this. They didn't like the fact that we had a weapon that powerful. So I'm going to end with that. Hopefully you guys are doing well. You have my email. You have access to Google Classroom. Don't hesitate to shoot me an email. I'm an open book. I'll help you out. Good luck in your other classes. I'm going to be nice and methodical with this. I'm not going to give you, I don't believe in homework, so I'm not giving you homework. I'm just asking you to watch these Prezis and kind of enlighten yourself and learn. And this should be nice and simple. You don't have to watch the Prezi, just watch those videos that I asked you to. 35 is the Disney, 55 is D-Day, and 104 is the Manhattan Project. Those are the 3 slides in my Prezi that I think you should watch. I think you'll get something out of it. And that's pretty much it. We're going to go into the Cold War by the end of the week. And that's it. So 14 minutes and 25 seconds. Take care. See you soon. Peace.